All right. Hi there, QGIS community. Welcome to the last session of the day. Today, we're going to be looking and taking a bit of a deep dive into actions in QGIS, so actions on different map layers. And Ujaval is going to be taking us through that. So I have shared a link in the live chat, which will link to the session that he is giving, the presentation, etc. So if you would like to follow along by yourself, please click the link. And over to you, Ujaval.
Great. Thanks, Amy. Glad to be here. Thanks for organizing this and for this opportunity to hang out with the QGIS community. This is the third time I've been to the open day and also always had fun. So really looking forward to sharing some of those cool demos today. Let me just start with my presentation.
Brilliant. I can see nicely.
All right. So we're talking about QGIS Actions, and I'll be giving a short talk, about 15 minutes. I'll spend a bit of time on what are actions, how we can access that, and what are some configuration options that you have. And then most of the talk is a bunch of demos. I've prepared a few demos that show you how powerful actions are, and maybe it'll inspire you to use actions in your work. And at the end, if you have time, and if you stick around till then, I have prepared a bonus demo. It's really cool. So we'll get to that. And then we'll do Q&A. I'll be stopping after each demo, and maybe if there are questions, Amy can just let me know, and I'll be happy to answer those questions.
Perfect. That sounds great.
And if you want to follow along, this is the presentation link, and I've linked the data package. And the data package contains all the projects and the data. So if you want to just try out the actions on your own computer, you can try this out and can download the data package from here. All right. A bit of introduction. I'm a long-time QGIS user, developer, and contributor. I've been writing the QGIS tutorials for a long time. Many of you might have seen that. Last couple of years, I've been writing the full-length courses, and you can check this out. Most of my career I've spent at Google working on the Google Maps team, and I was running a fairly large GIS operations team. And a lot of the demos you'll see are kind of inspired by that work where, we have so many things that are going on where multiple people are reviewing, editing, QAing the data, reviewing imagery, and whatever makes it easy to have this workflows automated, that really helps. So a lot of these demos, you'll see that if you're running kind of a QA data editing operation, it'll be really helpful there. I'm currently full-time into training. I host classes. I host live classes every weekend. People come in and join those classes to learn about QGIS, Python, Earth Engine, also certified QGIS trainers. If you take my QGIS courses, you can get a QGIS certificate. All right, so with that, let's figure out what QGIS actions are. So an action in QGIS is when something happens when you click a feature. And these are something that a user can set up. So as a owner of the project, you can set up these actions to happen. So whether you or your users can click on a feature, something happens. Right? And this is kind of a built-in feature into QGIS where you are able to plug into the QGIS and run a bit of Python code where when user clicks on something. And that may seem like a small thing, but imagine a lot of the things that you may have to customize. A lot of the plugins that you see in QGIS are essentially a button where the user takes a button and clicks on something. So actions are a great way to figure out where you need a button in QGIS where users can select the button, click somewhere, and something happens. And that something could be anything in QGIS, right? You have access to the full Python API of QGIS, and you can run any code when the user clicks on something. So this is very powerful. I really like actions. People sometimes I'm helping somebody figure out what they want to do with Python and QGIS, and say I want to build a plugin. And most of the time I said, no, don't build a plugin. You can just write just 2 lines of Python code, and you have all the functionality you need. So this is a great way to kind of automate QGIS, customize QGIS with a little bit of Python code. So we'll see. I want to kind of just first show you what an action looks like, and then we'll go through how to set this up. So this is a project. If you are following along, this is in your data folder. You have a folder called parcels, and I've loaded the QA project. The idea for a project is that we have a parcels layer here, and the parcels have a bunch of attributes. There's an attribute called checked. So the idea is that you are trying to check and validate the data, and you want to flip this flag to yes. So everything starts with no. Once you've reviewed a particular parcel, you say, I've reviewed this. This looks okay. I want to turn it to yes. So the normal way to do this would be I would go and select this parcel, put the data layer in editing, and find out where the feature is, and then I'll come here and update this value. And this is again 5 clicks. It's error prone. You might enter the wrong value, etc. So instead of all of this, we can use an action to help you do this automatically. So let's see how an action works on this. So when you have defined an action, I've defined an action on the parcels layer. It's already configured. And so when you select the layer, you will see this button here called, this is the actions button. And now we have an action that is available here. And the action says mark QA done. So I'm going to pick this action, and I'm just going to click on this feature. So see, it's in red because it's not checked yet. And it's choosing an action that I want to mark QA done. So I want to turn it to yes. So I click here, and you can see the attribute turned to Y, and I get a message saying it's updated. I can just click again, and this turns into Y. Right? So this is, actions always feel like a bit of magic to me, because you are clicking on something and a whole bunch of things happen. And here, in just one click, you are able to accurately update an attribute of a data layer, and that can save you so much time, and it's also much less error prone. I'll just show you where this is triggered from. So I'm going to the properties now on the parcels layer, and there's an actions tab here. For most of you, it will be empty, but you can create a new action. So define this action. We'll come to this, how to write this, but this is what the action code looks like. And actions can appear at multiple places. So I'm just going to say, make this action appear in attribute table as well. So now if I open up the attribute table of the data layer, you'll see that I have a button here, which is now the same action, which is here. It's also can be triggered from the attribute table. So now if I'm reviewing this data and say, this looks fine, I'll just say mark QA done. You can see this changed to Y. Right? So again, actions allow you to put these buttons at a variety of places in the right context of QGIS, and you can trigger those actions from there. So hopefully that gives you a good idea of what an action can do. And now let's look at some of the details of what happens behind the scenes. All right, so actions are defined on layer. So the first thing you need to understand is the actions are tied to a particular layer. And whenever the actions, that layer is selected and there's an action defined, you get this button that is enabled, and you can select one or more actions. And you can have even 100 actions defined for the layer. And you can pick whichever layer action you want to use, and it'll trigger that. And the actions get saved along with the project. So you define an action in the layer, you save a project, and when you ship your project to somebody, they have access to the same layer, same actions. So this is also a great way to share some of this extra functionality with the users. When you have a master project and all the users of your project get the same additional functionality. When you're using actions, one of the things that is confusing and you may have tough time deciding is something called action scope. So a scope of an action is where you have the button. So when you define an action, it will be asked to configure what is the scope of this action. And depending on what you choose, the action button will appear at different places. And you will also get access to different parts of QGIS when you define the scope. So one of the scopes is the canvas scope, and this is the most popular, most commonly used scope, where you have the button in your QGIS toolbar. This is attributes toolbar, and you can run an action by clicking on a feature. So this is by far the most popular, the most common one, where you have access to the entire layer in your code, and you also have access to the attributes of the particular feature that you click. So you click on a parcel, you get access to all the attributes of the parcel, and you can do something with that. You also get access to this location where you click. So imagine you have a polygon layer and you clicked on a feature, you also get the coordinates of where the user clicked, and you can use that in your code to do something with that. The next scope is the feature. Again, this go hand in hand. So the canvas and the feature scopes are usually both are enabled for an action, because and now this feature scope actions appear in the attribute table, just the way we saw in the example, where you have the button in your attribute table, and again, when you click the button, the action has access to the particular feature and all its attributes. There's a third scope called field. This is shown in when you identify a feature, you have the identify results. You can actually right click and run an action on a particular value. You can also right click anywhere on the attribute table and run an action. So that's a field scope. This action doesn't have access to all the attributes. It has access to the value of the attribute that you just selected. So it runs on a single attribute value. And this is useful where, for example, you have a URL in your attribute table and you want to just open the URL, or you want to do something with that. So that's the kind of a field scope for an action. And the last one is the layer scope. This has basically access to only the entire layer and selected features. So if you want to do define an action which just works on the layer level, you can have that as a scope. And this will become a little bit more clear once we have that. But if you're ever kind of working on a project and say, what scope should I choose? Use the canvas and feature. That's the default scope. That's where most of the actions really have the majority of the applications. So choose that. The rest two are there just in case you ever need to use some of that. Another thing to remember when you write an action is that there's a slightly different syntax to refer to fields and variables. So in QGIS expression engine, you can refer to a field with a double quote. So imagine you have a field called name, and you want to refer to that, you'll just use double quotes. When you're writing an action, you have to refer to it in a slightly different way. There's a syntax where there's a open square brace percentage, the attribute name, percentage, close square brace. And this syntax, what this would do is when the action is run, remember you clicked a feature and the action runs. So when you click the feature, the attribute values are passed on to the action. And when it detects a syntax like this, it says, oh, I see this syntax, I'll replace this whole thing with the value of the name field of that feature. And then you can use that in your code. Similarly, if you want to access the layer ID, you can just say @layer in your action script, and add the whole part with the percentage layer percentage will be replaced by the ID of the layer. So again, slightly different syntax, but once you get used to it, just it's a way to refer to a column or a variable in your action. All right, with that, we'll dive into demos. So I just want to stop sharing for a second and see if anybody has any questions.
So there's kind of more of a technical question. Just will the presentation that is that you have linked to still be available after this video or after the session? Will it sort of be available later on?
It'll be around, and you can always make a copy of it if you wish. You can just do file, make a copy, and it'll be saved in your Drive, Google Drive, so you can or you can download that as well. But I'll keep it around for a while.
Alrighty, and just so that you do know, there will also be a recording, obviously, of this video, which will be on the QGIS channel. So if anyone's worrying about that, please don't. The recording will be out there, and the data will be available. So far, that's the only question there is. So please continue.
All right. All right, so we'll do the first demo, and I'll show you how this action was set up, where you're able to click on a particular parcel, and the field of that parcel gets updated. So how does that work? So we'll start kind of developing this action from scratch, and I'll show you kind of some of the techniques that you can use where you are trying to work with actions. And when you're working on new action, it kind of could be quite daunting to write this full thing from scratch. And especially if you're a new PyQGIS programmer, you want to kind of do this iteratively. So one of the things that I like to do is kind of start something small, see if that's working, and then you can go from there. So I'll set up a new action. Let me just, so first thing is go to the properties of the layer where you want to set up an action, switch to the actions tab, and then click this plus button here. And it'll say what type of action you want. And again, there are OS specific actions where you say, I'm on Linux and I want to use this program to launch something. I typically don't use that. Again, the biggest advantage of QGIS is this cross platform. So I typically use Python programs, but if you need, you can use OS specific actions as well. And then there's a documentation of how to use that. So we'll say this is a Python action, and I'll just say this is a test. And you can keep this empty. And again, this is the scope part. And again, canvas and feature are a good default scope. So keep that around. Unless you know what you're doing, you don't need to check this field layer. Right, so now you have this place where you can write some code. So when you're starting out, let's just say it'll be good to just print the value of an attribute when you click on a feature. So at the drop down here, you have all the different attributes of that layer that are available. And the attribute that we are interested in is this checked, right? So you can select that and say insert. And as soon as you insert, you can see the syntax is the special syntax I mentioned. It is the percentage check percentage in the square braces. So let's just say print this, right? So when the user clicks on an attribute, I want to print the value of the checked field from that particular feature. And I've enclosed that in the string because this whole part will be replaced by the value of that field. And right now the field contains only Y or N. So yes or no. And this whole thing will be replaced by that. And then I'll print that in the Python console. So this is the simple thing. I've defined it. I'll just click OK. And now you can see I have another action here. So in the Actions tab, I have one more action here. So I'm going to open my console so I can see the result of the print that happens when I click on this. So I'm going to select the test action, and then I'm going to click on the parcels. You can see as I'm clicking, this values are getting printed here. And this is a kind of good test to see, okay, I've figured out how to read the attribute of a selected feature and print that. Another thing you may see that when you're using action, you might see this pop up with multiple features, right? And this is because the actions work at a feature level. When you zoomed out and you click something, and QGIS says, there might be ambiguation on whether you meant this parcel or this parcel. So this kind of give you the pop-up to just verify that you really wanted that. So if you ever see that and you want to get rid of it, you can just zoom in more and click on it. So there's no ambiguation on where you click. So you might see a feature like this where you can see multiple. But you can see now it's working. If I click on a parcel with the N attribute, it's printing that. All right. So let's go back to the action and I'll change that. So let's do something a little better. And I mentioned we have access to the full QGIS API. So instead of printing in the Python console, it'd be nice to print in the QGIS message bar. And this is the message where you see it's like, success or something is done. So that's the preferred way of communicating with the user. And so I'm just going to import iFace. And iFace is the variable that allows you to access all the objects from the QGIS interface class, which is all the buttons and UI and everything that's there. And instead of printing there, I'm just going to say iFace.messagebar push info. So this is the info message, and say and I'm just going to print this here. So now it's going to send a message saying that this is the value of that field. Let's see if that works. Oops. tills. Okay, so yeah, you need to debug, and it happens. So the typo is that it should be tills. Try that out. Right. So now you can see as I'm clicking, I get this nice message bar at the top of QGIS, and this is preferred. So if you're ever writing a plugin or some scripts, use the message bar. This is really user-friendly rather than a pop-up or something in your console. So I really like using this one. Right, so you can kind of see how this is set up. You are able to use all the kind of QGIS API and communicate with the user. So now let me show you the code for the action that I've set up to change the field attribute value, and we'll go through that. So this is the code, and here we are looking at the attribute field, and we just defining the variables here. The core of the action is here, where you say, once you know what the value is, and you say, set the value of that particular field. So this is the ID of the field. Change the value of that particular feature at that field, set it to yes. And then I'll push an info message saying that the field value got updated. And this syntax of using with edit layer, this is really useful one, because in the previous kind of syntax, you had to do start editing, you have to put the layer in editing mode, apply your changes, then say refresh your changes, stop editing. So it's a bunch of code, but this is a really nice Pythonic way of writing code, where you just say, edit the layer, execute this code. Once this code is executed, this comes out of the loop, and the layer's editing mode is closed automatically. So that's why you saw when you clicked on the button that the field value got updated, but you never saw the layer going into editing mode and coming out of the editing mode. And this is all it's done by this code. And this is what triggers that. So one more thing I would just want to show you, I'm just going to enable the field scope for this, just to show you what the action looks like in the field scope. So here I can click identify, and you can see I have the results of the identify. And now I can click on a particular attribute, right click, and you can see my action appears here. Here it will not work, because when I click, this doesn't have access to the field values. It just access to this particular one value that I've clicked. So I have to code it differently if it was a field scope, but this is where it appears. It also appears in your attribute table, where you can kind of right click anywhere, and you can see there's a now new option called mark QA. So this is what the field scope does. And if you ever need to do something that, hey, I need user to kind of interact with the value here, you can define an action with the field scope, and that does this. One example I recently saw of this was pretty cool. Was right now, if you right click, you can have this thing where you can copy cell content, and this gets copied as a plain text, plain string. But somebody said, I wanted to copy it in a formatted way, where I often have to paste stuff from my attribute table to a different spreadsheet or something, and I need the value to be formatted in a particular way. So you can just have an action, say, read the value, format it with some prefix, suffix, and copy that. So now you can just say, you have an action saying copy formatted value, and then they'll copy to your clipboard. So again, the small bits of things, but it can save you, it can make you really productive if you have that functionality there. So that's it for this demo. I want to stop sharing for a bit and just check if there are any questions or comments on this.
Mute. Nope, not so far. There are no comments in the live feed. So if you do have a comment, please just pop it on the live feed so I can read it through. And if not, yeah, continue.
All right, great. Let's dive in. All right, so the next demo is on group selection. Let me just open up. This is also on your data package. If you're following along, you can open this parsers there. It's the same data set, and I've set up a different action on that. So the idea for QGIS goes away if I hide this. Okay, Amy, can you see my QGIS window?
Yes, I can see your QGIS window.
Okay, cool. All right. So the idea here is that this parcels layer has, let's just show the attribute. There is FID, which is the unique ID for each of these parcels, and then there's a block number. So the block number is the same for all the parcels that are in the same street block. So this forms one block of the city, and all the parcels that form that block have the same block ID, and similarly here. And the idea is, again, this was inspired by a Stack Exchange post that I saw where the user said, I really often have to select all features from the same block, right? So if I do this, I got this extra parcel, so I need to go back and deselect those. It's kind of painful. And again, so this is a very easy to see which parcels have the same block, but maybe the block shape is irregular or it's not easy to select. It's kind of painful. So can I have an easy way where I just kind of, can easily select all parcels from the same block, and I don't have to deal with this kind of thing. So let's see, this is, again, when you have a problem like this, if you think, oh, I wish I can do something on a click, where I click on one parcel and all parcels get selected. This is the kind of natural fit to be an action. So let's see how that action works. Now, I have already defined this action here, and this is called select all parcels for the block. So I'll select that, and now see what happens. I select just one parcel from here, and all parcels get selected, all parcels with the same block number. And I can go here and say, I want to select all parcels from this block. Just click once here, and it gets selected. Click here, this gets selected. No messy selection, no errors. You can just quickly select that. And then maybe you can update the attributes or something that goes after that. Right, so this is a very simple one, but again, it can save you a lot of times, especially when you kind of have this task where you want to select particular things and you want to do it precisely. So this is a very simple action, just 2 lines of code. The way the action works is that when you click on a particular parcel, the code gets access to all the attribute values. It reads the block number attribute and say, this parcel, what's the block number? And then it does a query on the layer saying that select all the features where the block number is the same as where the user clicked. And that allows the selection to get updated with that. So let's have a look at that. And this is a Python action. This is the name, and the scope again remains canvas and the feature, because we are working at a feature by feature level. So that's the scope here. And let's go through the code. The first code is just finding the layer, saying that what's the layer ID, which is the layer ID that you selected. And then it does this query that this block number. So see the syntax where you have the percentage syntax. So the block number is an attribute. This part will get replaced by the actual block number. So if the block number was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, this whole thing will be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 when the query is run. So the query will be run layer.select by expression where the block number equals 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And that means when you click somewhere, the block number of that gets replaced here, and then all the features with the same block number get selected. So just 2 lines of code, but you can see it. If you are following along, if you have the data package, just try this out. This is really amazing to see that something unexpected happens when you click on a feature, and this is always a little magical when that happens. So do try it out, and you can see. All right, so now let's move on to the third demo. And this, again, credit for this goes to Klaus Clarkson on Twitter. I saw him post this, and I was like, wow, why didn't I think of this when I was managing large imagery collections? And there was a recent discussion on the Telegram feed where we were discussing on how to do this. So this is really great. And the idea is that what if I have thousands of imagery tiles on my hard drive or some external drive, and I want to manage that. I want to see where the footprints of the tiles are, and depending on my use case, I can load 1 or more tiles. And the question is, why can't you load all 10,000 tiles? Because again, this is often very large data sets, heavily compressed, and if you load all of them, your QGIS is going to crash. It's not going to be able to deal with that, even if you do all the optimizations like creating overviews and all of that. So when I was processing lot of aerial imagery, I'll get this really high resolution aerial imagery for a state or a county, and those would be 3-4 terabytes in size. I'll get this huge hard drive, and you can't possibly view all this imagery. And even if you can maybe view a few tiles. So how to kind of manage that? And this is something I use a lot. It's called a tile index. So a tile index is something that you create on a bunch of raster layers, where the index layer is basically a polygon layer referring to the bounding box of each tile, and the bounding box also has the path to the tile. So just create a very simple shapefile or a geopackage layer, which is a bunch of polygons that refer to where the extent of each of the tile, and then you can have an attribute that looks at the actual path. And this allows you to say, once you have a lot of raster data, you can create this tile index. You'll know what's the coverage that looks like, what's the where the different tiles are. It's also a great way to validate your data, because when you're creating this tile, if one of your tile is corrupted, you'll get that tile will be empty, and that's again a good way to check if you have any corrupted data in your index. And this is also a good way to catalog different raster data. Maybe you have a lot of raster data for different sources. You want to see where is the extent, and say, what data do I have for, say, Portugal? And I can just zoom into Portugal and see these are all the tiles I have. So how do you create that? I typically use the GDAL commands. So there's a command line tools that come with GDAL. There's a command called GDAL T-index, and that just show it a bunch of files in a folder, and it just generates an tile index. This is very fast and effective. The QGIS has processing toolbox, also has a tool called tile index that uses this in the background. But I found that QGIS, when you use the QGIS tool, it wants to actually read all the tiles, and that is very slow. If you're reading 10,000 tiles, it's going to take you forever. So this is much more effective. But if you just want to try this out, you can just use the QGIS processing tool called create tile index, or just run this command from on Windows. You can run it from your OSGeo shell that comes with QGIS, and you can create this index file. And we'll see how to kind of combine this index layer and actions to effectively manage this collection. So now we are in this tile index folder. I have a project called tile index in there, and this is the index layer. So this is again a very small subset of the NAPE imagery that the USDA makes it publicly available. This is a pretty nice 60 centimeter aerial imagery covering the entire US, and I've just downloaded a subset of the tiles. And I have those files sitting on an external hard drive. I've just created a tile index, and once I create the tile index, I'll get an indexed shapefile like this. This is just a bunch of polygons, and I have the attribute table, which is just referring to each individual tile. So now I have the tile layer. I've defined an action which says load selected tile. So now if I'm just browsing through and say, let me see what this area looks like in the tile. So I just want to load this one tile. So I can click load selected tile, click here, and you can see that tile will get read from the disk, and it'll get loaded into QGIS. Right, so now, just with one click, I was able to load this into QGIS. Maybe I want to see this tile as well. So I click here, and it gets this tile loaded. Right, so this is a nice, effective way to just load the tiles you need, and not having to have all of those different data sitting in your QGIS. So this is a very simple action. It just says read the path so when I click on a particular polygon, it reads the attribute where the path is saved and says just load that path into QGIS. And kind of opposite of that would be, once I'm done with this, I want to remove this. So I have another action. It says remove selected tile. And then I can click on this tile, and then that gets removed. You can see when I click, there are all these 3 layers remaining here in QGIS. Click here, and then that layer gets removed. Right? So again, this is a nice way to manage your imagery. And here we have probably 50 tiles, but imagine you had 10,000 tiles or a large area. This is very useful, where you can just zoom in and say, let me just look at this data, click, load the tile, you're done, remove it. Right? So this is the action. We'll go through how to set this up. So here I'm in the actions tab. I've defined these 2 actions. Let's look at this one. So remove this one. So the basic action is very, very simple. It just says, read the path, which is the location. So the location attribute has the actual path to the tile. So when I click on a particular polygon, read that path, and then this is the one line which says iface.add raster layer path. Right? So this is very, very simple. Let's see what this does. So now I will do this, and I click on this. This works. This also works. But see what happens, because when I load a new layer in QGIS, the active layer gets changed to that new layer that got loaded. So it's not easy. I would always switch back to this index layer and click again. So not very convenient. But again, since we have access to the full QGIS API, we can use some of this functionality that the API provides to change the selection back to the index layer. And that's the extra bit of code here where it says, I have a layer name index. After you've done, set that to the active layer. Now, with that bit, you can, when I click load, you can see the active layer always remains the index one. And then you're able to just click through different tiles and get it loaded. And the remove part is a little bit more complex. What it's using is when you click on it, it reads the file path, finds the layer name from there in your QGIS project, and then calls this remove map layer function to remove that, and then refreshes the canvas. But again, all of this happens so fast that it just feels like magic. You just clicking around and things get removed from your QGIS project. Right. Cool. So that's it for this demo. I'm going to pause here.
And have a look at the questions. All right. It seems that the USA side of the world is all waking up and saying hi.
Hello, everybody. All right. Cool.
All right. So then there is a question from Leonardo. Is it possible to use actions to draw a feature in another layer using the one that you're clicking as a reference?
Yeah, maybe he's reading ahead or watching ahead. That's my next demo. So let's just look at that.
Hold on, we're getting there.
All right. So that's a good segue into the next demo. And it's good that the US, yeah.
There is one last one. There's just from Gravel. Would you be able to load the tiles and remove them based on the visible extent?
Sure, because you'll be able to, when you click, you need to be able to click somewhere. So when you click something, and then the action gets triggered. And once it gets triggered, you can just say, read the iface.mapcanvas.extent, and you have the extent, and you can say whatever intersects that, load all the tiles. Right? So you can do things like that. So you need to be able to trigger the action somehow, but then once you trigger it, you'll be able to just use all the QGIS commands to load that. So maybe the next couple of demos are a little different. Maybe it'll give you an idea of how to do that.
All right. And then the last question is, are the custom actions that are made, or are these custom actions saved into the QGIS project?
Yes. So the actions are defined on a particular layer. And when you save that QGIS project along with the layer, those actions get saved. So again, it's a great way to ship your actions to somebody who put it in a project. And when somebody opens your project and selects this layer, they have the same actions available to them.
All right. And then the last one from Ed Hawkins. Can I use actions to copy attributes from one feature to one I am entering?
Huh. So hi, Ed. I'm going to show your demo next. So the next demo is courtesy of Ed Hawkins. So good to have you here. I think you should be, if I'm understanding your questions correctly, you want to be able to select a feature and say, read the attribute. You can save it to somewhere. There's no way to kind of pop a feature or pop a form that you are able to enter in an action. But if you just say, I'm clicking the feature, take the attribute from here and save it somewhere else, I think you should be able to do that.
All right, fantastic. Hi there, Abdul Muhammad. Greetings from Ethiopia. That's amazing. Welcome. All right, let's continue on to the next section.
Cool. So I'm going to show this one. All right. So this is an example of a very complex action that you can do. You can actually build a really complex functionality into the action, but action provides a great framework to trigger that code. So this is the idea. Again, this is courtesy of Ed Hawkins, who's in the chat. Welcome, hi Ed. He's provided the data for this, and the idea was that we have a street network, and we want to do reverse geocoding. So what is reverse geocoding? Well, you want to assign an address to a location. So you have a point, and you say, what is the address of this lat long? And how do you determine that? Well, the common use method is you have a street network, you have a range of addresses for each street, and depending on where you click, you find the nearest point on the street and interpolate that, saying that the start address is 100, end address is 200, you click somewhere in the middle, you should be 150. And again, there's typically, there's on the left side of the street, there's an odd number, right side of the street, there's an even number. This is used where there are the countries where you have a formal addressing system. Other countries where you don't have a formal addressing system, what you do is you have another point layer or a polygon layer which defines all the features, and there's an attribute attached saying this is the address of this place. And wherever you click, you find the nearest point. You say, hey, I clicked here, find me the nearest address point, and assign that address to that. And that's commonly how reverse geocoding is done. So let's see how to do reverse geocoding in QGIS through actions. So this is the data layer. This is Henderson County in Tennessee. There are streets network here, and then there are the bunch of points here. And the idea is we want to check or assign an address to each of these points. And once the points get rendered, you will see that this is the street name, and this is the point. And the idea here was that assigning address is typically kind of a more involved formal process. The idea is you can validate those addresses and saying, oh, this particular point is assigned the address 100 Westwood Street. Is that correct? And you can kind of check that by reverse geocoding and see if it matches. So let's just see how to do that. I'll go through the code as well. I want to, for the demo, I want to go to a particular street. Again, for the users who don't know about this, there's a really cool search box in QGIS at the bottom left. You can search for a bunch of things in QGIS, and I like to use it to, right now, say I'm looking for a particular street, and I want to just zoom to that. Instead of going to attribute table, doing a filter, I can just say AF and then type the street name. And I can say, oh, there's a street name Church here, click here, just go here. Right? So this is a really powerful search box. If you don't know about it, explore this, and there's some help here to be able to do that. So let's look at this particular street here. So the way the reverse geocoding works is that this is a street segment, and you can see the letter here says 700. So the start of the street is 700. End of the street is 708 on the right side. And on the left side, the street address starts on 701 and ends at 767. So now I have added an action saying that I want to get an address for a particular point and see what happens when I click here. So I click here, and it says this is 739 Church Street, and it's on the left side of the street. And this also, you can see there's a point that got added. So this was a question on, can I create a new feature? So you can, because I just did. I clicked on a point, a new point gets created as a referencing, okay, this was the nearest point on the street. It's snapped here and say how far along this point is from the start. And the start address is this, and you interpolate that, you say this was the address. And let's try this again. If I click on the right side of the street here, you can see this is 745, which is on the right side. If I click on the left side, it'll say this is 706 on the left side. Right? So this is all being done through Python code, and you are able to kind of validate this in real time and say, hey, let me check the address of that. And you can also see that it's correctly picking up the left or right side of things. So let me show you the code for this, how this is set up. And I've set up the code such that if you want to use this in your own data layer, if you have a data layer and you want to reverse geocoding, you can just replace these field names and street names and you should be able to work. And if you just want to do bulk geocoding of your features, you can just put this in a for loop, run this as a Python script and it'll work. This is set up more as an action where something happens in response to it. And again, this was a very fun thing to do because QGIS is so powerful, the API is so powerful. You have a lot of this access to functions that does phenomenal things. So I'll go through some of the features of the API that I used here. So the first one is the spatial index. Remember, this is a very large layer. So when I'm clicking on a point, I want to find the nearest street to that. I click the feature, say, which is the nearest street. And if I have a lot of streets, just kind of iterating through that takes a lot of time. So instead, I can use a spatial index and say, find me all the streets which are nearby and within certain distance, and I get the nearby features, and I can just iterate to that and find the feature. So then I can find the nearest feature. Once I found the nearest feature, which is the line segment, there's this really neat function called closest segment within context. And this means it's given a point and a line, it's just going to give me the nearest point on the line. And along with that, it also gives me the direction of the line that's joining that point. So this is a built-in function in QGIS API that gives me that. And once I have the point on the street segment, I have the direction field, which what is the direction from the point where I clicked to the nearest road. And if it's negative, this point must be on the left side. If it's positive, it must be on the right side. So this is again a clever thing to determine whether the point you clicked, which was on the left side or the right side of the street. This is very easy for us to figure out, but if you want to code this in algorithm, this is a really clever way to say, determine the angle between the point and the closest point on the street, and if it's negative, it's on the left side. And then you have the nearest point on the line, you determine that, and then once you have this function which says line locate point, that means interpolate the line and say how far along this point is from the start, and they'll give you a distance saying this point that you found on the line, this is 100 meters from the start, and that's the linear interpolation. This works even if a geometry is curved, it will do the right interpolation. So this is a really useful function for that. And once you have that, you can just do a simple linear interpolation and find the addresses and locate that. And at the end, this is the code to create a new layer. So again, I can use the full QGIS API and say, just create a new vector layer as with a point and just add this to my map. So at the end, I'm just creating that. So this is again a very complex thing. This could be like a processing script or a plugin itself to do this, but you are able to embed that kind of complex code in an action and able to trigger this on a user action. So many times when you have this kind of thing, if you have this instinct of let me build a plugin, think twice, see what you are building. You might be able to just build a simple action, and then you don't have the burden of maintaining a plugin and publishing it and so on. All right, so that's the address point demo. I'm going to stop sharing for a bit and see if there are more questions. Otherwise, I'm going to finish off with the last two demos.
Alrighty, great. So there was one question just sort of when we started, again from Greville Homer, and they ask, would the actions be accessible server-side, or would they need to be translated into a QGIS server plugin?
I believe I'm not done much work with the QGIS server, but I believe it has to be a plugin. I don't know if the actions are there on the plugin side, on the server side. Maybe somebody in the chat or somebody who's listening may have a better idea, but I'm not sure about that.
Alrighty, that's the only other question there was. So let's dive into the next one.
All right, I think we have time for the bonus action as well. So I'm going to cover both of them together. So this
no, that's okay. Also, there's no session after you, so if we run a little bit over, it's all right.
Okay. So this is another example of an action which is combining, where you're able to not only use the stuff in QGIS, but you're able to call out and use an API from somewhere else. And this was one of the participants in my class. He said, I have this problem where I have a bunch of points, and these are the location of pharmacies, and it'll be nice to be able to just check what the street view around that looks like. And so I can just validate whether the pharmacy's points are the correct location or not. And there are street-level imagery service. So Google provides a Google Street View API. There's another service called Mapillary. If you've not heard of this, is a really great user-generated content service where you're able to upload street panoramas to the site, and you were able to share that with the world. It was an open source, like an integrated OpenStreetMap. Recently, Facebook bought them, so now it's a Facebook property, but it's still openly accessible database over the street-level imagery. And here, what I'm trying to show is that we have a point layer. I want to look at the street-level imagery for each of this point. And that means when I click on a point, it's going to look at the lat long of the point. It's going to ask Mapillary that show me the photo, the street level photo at this location, and display that in QGIS. And all of this will happen seamlessly, all within QGIS. So let's do the demo for this. So this is a layer where I'm in action. And you can see there's an action says show panorama from Mapillary. And let's see, I want to click here. So I pick this point, and you'll see that a pop-up comes and say, oh, this is a Walgreens pharmacy here, and this is the street level imagery that was caught from Mapillary. And you can do this just by clicking here. So I click here, and again, I get this photo, and you can see there's a pharmacy on the right side. So again, this is a great way to validate your data with the street level imagery. And it's all, once you sign up for an API, it's a free API service. And you can just zoom in anywhere, click, and just look at the street level imagery to just check what's on the ground here. And this is all coming from Mapillary. So let's see how this is defined. You have this API key here. You can, in your, if you're using this from the data package, you'll have to, this is empty. In your code, you have to sign up for a Mapillary and get your own client ID. Here, you just say, I clicked on this point, and this is the X and Y. So $X, $Y refers to the coordinates, X and Y coordinates of the particular point. And it's just sending this request to this service and saying, this is my API key, this, give me a point that's closest to this, and you get this. And there are, again, a bunch of formatting options. You can kind of say, give me a panorama that is facing this direction, and you'll get something that's the direction. So you can kind of code that up as well. And then you can get this. Once you get the response back, you read the image, and then display a Q web view, which is a built-in web browser that comes with Qt and QGIS. So you can just display that in a web browser, you load that image. So very simple action, but you are able to now code this up so that you are able to call an API from that. And this has got a lot of implications. Now you are able to call all APIs by just one click in QGIS. So if you have an internal API in your organization, or you want to bring data from an external API, you can now integrate that with QGIS. All right, and now I'm going to end with the last demo, and this is the buffer select demo. So this data comes from OpenStreetMap. This is for the city of Bangalore. I've downloaded the buildings layer. So these are all the building footprints, and this is a roads layer. And the idea is that maybe you are doing some work for the city, maybe you're doing some urban planning, or you want to do some maintenance work on the street and say, I want to dig up this road. Which houses will get affected by this? And or you want to say, I want to assign some attribute to all the buildings that fall within some buffer of that. So it'll be nice to just be able to select a line and say, show me all the buildings that fall in a certain distance. And this is another example of working with multiple layers. So you are defining action on this road layer, but when you click the road features, you get the road feature, and you can use that geometry of that buffer and then say, find all features from this another building layer and select that. So let's see how that works. So I have an action here, select buildings within buffer. So I select this road segment, and you can see all buildings within, say, a 20-meter buffer get selected. And now I can just go anywhere and say, show me all the buildings within 20 meters here. And it just selects that. Right? So this is another way to just quickly apply some very precise operations without you manually fiddling around. And you could as well just say, have an action, and maybe once you do this, you have another action saying that, update attributes of all the features within 20 meters, and you can do that. I did an urban planning course recently, and one of the examples we showed was maybe you're doing some zoning and say, I want to define a buffer area around all institutional land use where you have an education institute and you want to say there should be a no noise zone around that. So and then you select all the buildings that are around that, and you can set up a zone around that. So again, you can have many applications, but in a quick way to just do all this complex spatial select and analysis operation with just one click. Cool. So that's all I had. I want to end with just one more thing. Let me share the screen again. So if you're interested in this, the code for all the actions and more is available at this URL on my GitHub repository. You can see how those are defined. If you find this inspiring and say, oh, this was cool, I wish I could code in Python, or I wish I could code in PyQGIS, I have a free course, which is a full-length course. You can just download the materials and work on it. So this is called Customizing QGIS with Python. You can do that. And then I have hundreds of hours of QGIS learning material on my site. Everything I do, everything I teach is all open and freely available in multiple languages. So you can just go to this resource page and access all the stuff that I have. So great, and feel free to contact me anytime. I'd love to hear from you if you ever work on something related to QGIS, and if you need help, feel free to reach out anytime. And I would love to hear if somebody in the audience has used Actions before, and or maybe has some ideas. I would love to hear about that as well. So thank you.
Awesome, thank you so much. That was fantastically interesting and just such a useful tool to be able to use and really simplify our lives a little bit using QGIS. So there is one question from Narcelio. I hope I didn't butcher that. And yeah, they ask, is it possible to modify this action to update a field in the points table?
Yeah, absolutely. So you are able to, instead of just doing a select, you can say select all the features within that, and then update an attribute similar to what we did in the first example where you updated the QA. You clicked on feature and the feature changed from no to yes. So you can update the field. And again, the idea is that you can do almost everything in the QGIS. And Actions allow you to trigger that. So the trigger is the click. When you click on a feature or select a feature, something attributable, that triggers that action. And once you have that, you can call any part of the QGIS API and do a whole bunch of things. So that's, again, the mental model is that I can do anything in QGIS in response to your user action. So pretty much everything is possible.
All right, fantastic. Let me just check if there are any last-minute questions. I think that was the last one in the chat. Raul does say thank you very much, Ujaval.
Welcome.
So just a couple of thanks and questions. Any last questions, please don't hesitate to ask. No, we seem pretty much well done there. Yeah, no, just generally people saying thanks for the fantastic presentation.
Welcome. It's great being here, and hopefully we'll meet here again in the next open day sometimes. Absolutely.
So the links to the different things are in the chat, but I will also put them into the description of the video recording. The video recording will be up as soon as possible. Sometimes YouTube does a 24-hour delay for some reason, but if you do wish to watch this video or any of the QGIS Open Day videos, just check out the videos playlist on the channel, and they are all there, all the recordings of every Open Day since we began. So please don't worry, the recordings are absolutely available. And that just leaves me to thank everyone who was part of today's Open Day. And yeah, no, look out for the planning for next month's Open Day. If you have an amazing idea or want to share something as a session, please just pop me a message on Telegram or on the QGIS Open Day group, and then we can start planning for the next Open Day. And thank you all for being involved.
Thanks, Amy, for organizing everything. I know it's a lot of work, so thanks for doing this.
No, absolutely. You know what? It's so great to be involved with such a great community, and a community that are also, you know, wanting to do things and wanting to show off and wanting to, you know, be game for stuff, for want of a better word, you know. So it makes my life a lot easier. And if I ask for assistance with something, I mean, even today we were making thumbnails for the videos, so it's absolutely amazing, and it's just really good fun, to be honest.
Yeah. Great.
All right, thanks much, Ujaval.
Bye. Bye.
Cheers.